we never got a clear answer about who Candace and Phineas's dad really is. Not in the show, not even from the creators. In fact, they've said they intentionally left it out, saying the family together is what matters. But I don't want to believe that. I want my biological parents, their biological parents, and I went through hidden files and science books only to discover Gru is Candace's real dad, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is Phineas's real dad. And if that's that, then it is totally possible that Gru, his twin brother Drew, and Doofenshmirtz are all brothers. Like actual family. Sit tight, because even I wasn't ready for these things to make sense. And while I am here trying to make sense of it for you, what do you think if Gru, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and Megamind had to fight? Like in an all-out battle of brains and inventions, who would win? Let me know in the comments and I'll tell you what I think after we connect the family dots. So you must be wondering, how are Gru and Dr. Doofenshmirtz even related? Well, if you've watched Despicable Me and Phineas and Ferb, you've probably noticed something weird. They kind of talk the same. They both build machines no one asked for, and they both had traumatic childhoods in cold, emotionally unavailable European countries. Coincidence? I don't think so. Let's start with the accent. Gru and Doofenshmirtz both have that classic, unplaceable, cartoon, vaguely Eastern European villain voice. But dig a little deeper, and you'll notice that Doofenshmirtz is actually from Drusselstein, which is a parody of countries like Austria or Germany. Meanwhile, Gru grew up in Fredonia, a fictional Eastern European nation that also feels suspiciously Germanic. Same region, same accent family, same tendency to over-enunciate words like destruction and innator. We already know Gru and Drew are confirmed twins. Drew's the happy-go-lucky light side, while Gru was the cold-hearted villain who eventually turned soft. Doof's got the accent, just slightly more exaggerated than Gru's, which makes sense if he stayed in Drusselstein longer, while Gru moved to a more westernized Fredonia. And why is that? Well, all three brothers were born somewhere in the Drusselstein region. Gru and Drew were later taken to Fredonia, maybe adopted by the cold, emotionless woman who became Gru's mother. Meanwhile, Doofenshmirtz was left behind, literally raised to be a lawn gnome. I wish I was exaggerating. Now, inventions. Doofenshmirtz built things like the Make Everything Smell Like Cheese Innator, the Turn Everything Evil Innator, and the De-Age Innator. Gru? He's got freeze rays, shrink rays, cookie robots, and a literal rocket to the moon. Both of them invent innators, or at least innator energy machines. They even design them the same way. Big red buttons, unnecessary knobs, and zero safety features. These two didn't just study villain tech. They probably talked about this stuff as kids, like bedtime stories, except instead of fairy tales, it was, one day I'm going to build a ray that steals the moon. Are you seriously telling me these guys didn't share blueprints in their childhood? Nah, man, they had to have grown up together, at least for a while. Maybe they stayed up late dreaming of the biggest, dumbest inventions they could build. Gru wanted to be the best villain. Doof just wanted to make his parents notice him. They both went into villainy for validation, separated by trauma, guilt, a few European borders, and eventually copyright laws. So now we've got three genius inventors living in different franchises, each trying to prove something to a world that never really cared about them. And if they are brothers, that means Phineas and Candace are cousins, and Vanessa is a part of the same emotionally chaotic bloodline too. This family has more triangle-shaped heads than a geometry test. Now we never actually meet Phineas or Candace's biological dad. He's not around, talked about, or even referenced like a real person. It's like the show went out of its way to erase that part of the family. But just because we don't see him doesn't mean he's not there. In fact, I'd argue he's everywhere. In their personalities, in their obsessions, even in their noses. Let's start with Candace. If you line up everything Candace does, the way she behaves, the way she plans, the way she melts down, you start to notice a very familiar energy, Gru. She's practically a teenage Gru in yoga pants. Think about it. Gru is constantly scheming. He builds entire missions just to get recognition from his mom, from the world, from himself. And as children turn out mostly like their parents, so is Candace. She creates elaborate traps to bust her brothers just so her mom will finally validate her. They both need control. They both unravel when things don't go their way. And when they do break down, it's loud, dramatic, and kind of iconic. And of course, there's the visual stuff. I'm not saying skull shape is genetic proof, but come on. Candace and Gru both have that round skull, sharp cartoon nose. Candace's nose is still growing. Big eyes, and the same chaotic slouched posture when they're mid-rant. Even their hands move the same way, flailing around with exaggerated villain-level drama. So, when exactly was it possible for Linda Flynn Fletcher to have been with 3 different men? Let's lay it out. We start with Gru. Candace is 15 years old, and if we rewind back, that puts her birth around the late 90s. And what was Gru doing in the late 90s? According to Despicable Me, 2010, he was already active as a villain. In a flashback, he brags about stealing the Statue of Liberty, the one from Las Vegas. But still, and the Eiffel Tower, also the Vegas version. Point is, he was in the US, running around with wild gadgets and questionable social skills. Now enter Linda Flynn, a redhead with a spontaneous artsy vibe who was a pop star in her younger years, probably peaked in the mid to late 80s based on the style of her song and flashbacks in Phineas and Ferb. By the 1990s, she's no longer at the top of the charts and might have been performing in places like Vegas, retro clubs, or even international events. Gru, from Despicable Me, was born in the 1960s, according to Minions, The Rise of Gru, where he's 11 in 1976, meaning by the 1990s, he's in his 30s, and likely at the height of his villainous career in training or doing odd missions across the globe. It's not hard to imagine their paths crossing. Maybe at a party where someone accidentally froze the DJ, a quick connection, a moment of chaos, and then, like all prequel-worthy romances, it ends. Gru vanishes back into villainy. Linda returns to her touring circuit, and a few months later, Candice is born, with her career as a pop star coming to an end, and her going back to finish school. Then comes Doofenshmirtz. We know Linda and Heinz dated when they were teens. In What Do It Do? There's a flashback of them on a cringy date where Doof shows off one of his early innators, and yeah, it doesn't go great, but the door was clearly open. Maybe they reconnected years later during Linda's young adult chaos era. Doof was still hanging around Drusselstein, or maybe doing a US internship in evil science. One invention demo, and we had Phineas. And you don't even need a paternity test. Phineas is Doof, the triangle head, the hyperfixation on building the impossible, the musical numbers, the weirdly cheerful personality built on a cracked foundation of childhood neglect. Even their inventions feel the same, unnecessary, and powered by pure emotion. Doof tries to take over the tri-state area. Phineas builds a roller coaster before breakfast. Same vibe, different branding. Then finally, Lawrence Fletcher, Ferb's dad, and Linda's eventual husband. We see in various episodes that they met later in life, likely after their previous relationships ended. Lawrence is a calm British antiques dealer, the opposite of Doof. He's the guy who steps in after the chaos. They fall in love, get married, and become one of the most wholesome blended families in cartoon history. Phineas and Ferb as stepbrothers, Candice as the older sister trying to hold it all together, and Linda finally settled down after her very experimental romantic history. And that would explain why Candice is hell-bent on getting the brothers caught, because they are not real siblings. If there's one thing this bizarre family tree has in common, it's brain power, questionable morals, sure, emotional instability, definitely. But make no mistake, this family runs on genius. Let's start with Gru. The man literally built a spacecraft that could launch missiles and shrink the moon. Not theorize about it, not sketch it on a napkin. He did it. The guy engineered global-level tech while surrounded by bald, banana-loving blobs who may or may not have workers' rights. Gru's skill is threatening. Governments should be worried. He's the kind of guy who invents laser weapons in the morning and then teaches ballet to his daughters by dinner. Now compare that to Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. Doof's inventions are ambitious, but not exactly practical. While Gru is launching orbital weaponry, Doof is out here building the turn bread into toast innator. It works, to be fair, it just does something that already exists. Toaster. He also has machines that can change the pitch of your voice, make things smell like cheese, and one that just rotates things slightly to the left. Doof isn't solving global problems, but at least he's vibing on his childhood dreams. His genius is real, but it's emotionally fueled. He doesn't build for efficiency, but because someone looked at him wrong in 1974, and he still remembers. And what about their ability to fight? Gru's no super soldier, but he can hold his own. We've seen him go hand to hand with supervillains, command airships, and survive explosions without flinching. Combat readiness? Moderate to high. Doofenshmirtz, on the other hand, has a success rate of about 8.3%, and that's being generous. He's more likely to trip over his own invention than win a fight. His only real threat is Perry the Platypus, who is less of a nemesis and more of a codependent life coach with a tail. Even their sidekicks are telling. Gru has minions who will do anything for him, usually screaming. Doof has Perry, and while technically an enemy, Perry spends most of his time cleaning up Doof's messes and occasionally helping him work through childhood trauma. It's not villainy, but in fact therapy, but the kids didn't inherit what you'd expect. Phineas didn't get Gru's cold strategy or big budget weapons. He inherited Doof's hyper logic and chaotic optimism. That drive to create something, anything, just because it's fun and exciting and mildly dangerous, that's Doofenshmirtz DNA, no doubt. Every time Phineas invents something wildly unnecessary, like a time-traveling fish tank or a beach in the backyard, you can feel the Doof energy pulsing through it. Candice, meanwhile, is pure Gru. The meltdowns, planning, and constant need for validation. We've built the family tree, analyzed the trauma, and now it's time for what you had been waiting for, the fight. No stepkids or musical numbers, emotional beach days, just three genius-level minds with wildly different vibes squaring off. Gru, Doofenshmirtz, Megamind. Gru is the most practical threat here. The man built a spacecraft capable of launching missiles and shrinking the moon. He operates like a villain-turned-hero hybrid, skilled in combat, emotionally weathered, and armed with an army of minions that are somehow both incompetent and unstoppable. When Gru goes to war, he brings gadgets, strategy, and a lifetime of mother issues fueling his decisions. He's not the smartest guy in the room, but he's the most dangerous one in a straight-up fight. Now, shift over to Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz, equal parts brilliant and emotionally bankrupt. He's creative, inventive, and surprisingly philosophical when he's not getting zapped by his own machines. But Doof's biggest weakness? Himself. His innators have names like the Duplicate Inator and the Make Everything Smell Like Cheese Innator. And while they technically work, they usually end up sabotaging him just in time for Perry the Platypus to kick him through a window. That said, you can't count him out. Doof doesn't follow logic, but runs entirely on raw emotion, petty grudges, and unresolved childhood pain. That makes him unpredictable. One day, he's flattening toast with a ray gun. The next, he's rewriting the laws of physics by accident. He's not dangerous because he wants to be. He's dangerous because he has no idea what he's doing. But it does it anyway. And then, there's Megamind. If Gru is the muscle and Doof is the chaos, Megamind is the strategist. He's the one with a plan, a backup plan, and a decoy version of himself giving a monologue while he escapes through a trapdoor. His inventions are sleek, his traps are clever, and unlike Doof, his evil plans actually succeed, until he decides they shouldn't. That's the twist. Megamind has not only mastered villainy, but mastered letting it go. He's evolved past petty revenge. He's playing mental chess while everyone else is arguing over who gets the freeze ray. So, what happens when these three clash? Gru brings the firepower. He's got the dad mode intensity that kicks in when things get personal. Doof is the wild card. He might lose the battle, trip over a wire, and accidentally activate a backup device that reverses time or turns everyone into ducks. He won't win, but he might make sure no one else does either. Megamind, though, Megamind takes the crown, not because he hits hardest or builds the biggest, but because he outthinks them both. He would watch Gru and Doof exhaust themselves, trigger half a dozen innators, and then swoop in with a single hologram and a smirk, saying Olo, declaring checkmate before anyone knew they were playing. Final call? Gru wins the war. Doof wins the sympathy vote. Megamind wins the game. I've probably broken a few copyright boundaries in the process, but I want to hear from you. If these guys did meet, who's walking away with the last word? Drop your theories, roast my logic, or tell me which villain deserves a solo spin-off where he finally gets a functioning coffee machine. Don't forget to like and subscribe.